Kamala Harris to the Queen City and to the campus of JC. Yeah, that's the way we do it. So I want to say that there's really the idea that we are proud of what we do in this great city. Our true economic opportunities must reach all corners of our city. And at the same time, we have to recognize that too many families still struggle with the rising cost of healthcare, housing, education, and other essentials for our living styles. That's why the Biden-Harris administration building wealth agenda is so vital. Thank you very much, Connie. Yeah. Their initiatives are focused on creating pathways to prosperity for all Americans through investments in affordable housing, small business development, job training, child care affordability, and much more. With policies like expanding the child tax credit, that deserves some applause, enhancing funding for minority businesses, that's enough, providing debt relief for student loan borrowers, and proposing $25,000 of down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. So this administration is taking concrete action to make the American dream accessible again to all. I want to thank her for, along with the president, for the tireless leadership on this crucial issue of building inclusive wealth. We're honored to host the Vice President in Charlotte today and look forward to her comments on how we can open up economic opportunities for all. Thank you very much, Charlotte. Let's be proud.
Please welcome U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Deputy Secretary, Andrea Palm.
Hi there, I'm Andrea Palm. I have the privilege of serving as the Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really honored to be in North Carolina with the Vice President. And really want to thank her for everything that she's doing to lead our efforts to reduce costs and create economic opportunity all across America. I also want to thank Governor Cooper for his leadership and commitment to helping all North Carolinians get access to quality, affordable health care. I'm really proud also of the work that we're doing in the Biden-Harris administration at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to ensure that everyone has access to the care that they need. Today, more than 300 million Americans have health care coverage. And this year, a record, number at 21.4 million people signed up for health coverage through the Affordable Care Act marketplaces. That's a record number for us. I also want to note that thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, that coverage through healthcare.gov for 4 out of 5 Americans cost $10 or less per month. You can't get to a movie for $10. You, in some places, can't get a cup of coffee for $10. It's really an important part of the way that we make coverage affordable for the American people. Further, this administration has taken numerous actions to protect and strengthen the Affordable Care Act, to strengthen Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program for hardworking families, to lower premiums, to expand access to affordable coverage in all the opportunities that we have as a U.S. government. We're ensuring that Americans have access so that they can take advantage of the opportunities that we are working with states like North Carolina to make available. And how do we know that the work of the Biden-Harris administration is having such a big impact on Americans? We know it because the data tells us that it's true. Last week, a number of reports came out that showed us the historic gains that we've had in healthcare coverage, particularly in underserved communities across this country. And that has all come out of vigilant work in our implementation of the Affordable Care Act. Central to how we think about and ensure that Americans have access to affordable health care is the Medicaid program. Currently, a record 92 million Americans get their coverage through Medicaid and/or the Children's Health Insurance Program, and that includes more than 2 million folks here in the state of North Carolina. Last year, as you all know, North Carolina became the 40th state to expand Medicaid. And that means that more than 600,000 North Carolinians became newly eligible to gain access to health care coverage. And as of today, the governor and I were just talking about it backstage, more than 480,000 North Carolinians have availed themselves of this new opportunity. And that is really important progress in a very short amount of time since enactment of that law. And certainly it would not have been possible without the leadership of this governor. And we at HHS want to express our heartfelt thanks to the governor for his partnership, for his tireless work to get that bill across the finish line and to drive implementation so that you all are where you are today. And so we really are, as a nation, closer than we have ever been to thinking about healthcare as a right for all and not a privilege for a few. I also want to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing to lower costs in the healthcare system and are really proud of some of that work. Under President Biden and Vice President Harris's leadership, Medicare-covered insulin is now capped at $35 a month, making this life-saving medication more accessible. Preventive vaccines through the Medicare Part D program are now free of charge. And with the newly enacted $2,000 cap, expenses are really in a place where they're not going to get out of hand. If you know that every year your out-of-pocket expenses are capped at $2,000, that is a predictable amount that is, I think, really important for families to know about in Medicare. And right now, this very moment, the team back at HHS is negotiating directly with pharmaceutical manufacturers to lower the cost of the 10 most commonly used drugs in the Medicare program. And when those negotiations are done, we predict that this will save as much as $100 billion over 10 years. Yeah. That is a lot of money to stay in the pockets of hardworking American families instead of in the pockets of big pharma. I also want to acknowledge that despite all this progress, many families still face medical debt. And that is something that this vice president has made a priority to tackle. And we know at HHS that the best way to prevent medical debt is to continue to make progress in access to coverage, in getting more Americans covered, in tackling the cost of that coverage. And in the meantime, the vice president has challenged all of us to go even further. And yesterday, she called upon states, local governments, healthcare providers to take additional actions to relieve the burden of medical debt for millions of Americans. In that call, she announced a rule that would remove medical debt from credit reports for more than 15 million Americans. And that's a really big deal. So it's not just about healthcare, right? The cost of healthcare is tied to your economic well-being as a family. It's about your economic security. It's about your peace of mind. And we understand in the Biden-Harris administration that it's all connected together. I'm proud to serve in this administration, and we're committed to tackling these issues in service to American families. And I'm really proud to serve along this vice president and support her leadership and the work that she is doing to lift up Americans everywhere. Thank you so much again for having us here today.
Please welcome U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Acting Secretary, Adrienne Todman.
Well, hello, Charlotte. How y'all doing today? It is good to be here. It is good to be here. It's great to be in the great state of North Carolina. So, as HUD's leader, I meet a lot of people while I'm traveling the country. And what I hear most folks say is that they really just want to have a fair shot to get ahead. Isn't that right? They want to be able to put down roots and save for their future and have something that they can leave behind for their children and their grandchildren. And I am so proud to serve in an administration that is making sure people have that fair shot. This administration, from day one, has worked to ensure Americans of all backgrounds can access the tools and resources they need to build their lives of their dreams. A few weeks ago, I was in Denver, where I met a mom who was able to save enough money while she was living in subsidized housing, and she was able to buy a home for herself and her 3 kids, and she talked about how excited the kids were running and finding their own bedrooms. And it's all thanks to a program that we run at HUD that under this administration, we expanded under this president and our vice president. And maybe it's the families that I met who received down payment assistance and bought their home and are now building wealth for their families. It's stories like these that live in communities here in Charlotte and across the country. And they're happening because our president and our vice president have made it a priority to create economic opportunities. In fact, right here in Charlotte and across the state of North Carolina, hundreds of thousands of families are able to buy their first home and keep their homes because of investments and changes that this administration made from day one. And it means that thousands of people are building wealth and equity that they can pass on to the next generation. And we're here today because we want to make sure that we're opening up the doors of opportunity for even more people, including people with medical debt. It's estimated that if medical debt is no longer counted on a person's credit score, their score will increase by about 20 points on average. And that might seem like it's not a lot, but it can make this big difference between qualifying for a mortgage for your first home or qualifying for a mortgage to help your kids. In fact, it's estimated that this change alone will lead to some 22,000 new mortgages. So that means 22,000 families being approved every year. And more families can reap the benefits of generational wealth through homeownership. And I'm happy to say that because June is National Homeownership Month. And this is what's possible when you have a president and a vice president and my colleagues across the federal family who are making sure that everyday folk can realize their dreams. For example, in this administration, we've invested millions of dollars into housing counseling services so people get trustworthy advice when they're buying their first home. It's hard enough, and sometimes you need somebody to help you with that really complex path. And last year, as interest rates went up, didn't they go up though? As interest rates went up, Vice President Harris announced a historic cut in HUD's mortgage fees, a change that has helped more than 680,000 people across this country save almost $1,000 just in the first year of their mortgage and over $600 million just in the first year alone. And look, we know that more people need help. We know that people are seeing that costs are still high to rent and to purchase a home. We know that there is more to do. But that's why President Biden and Vice President Harris have a plan to bring down costs by not just building more housing to rent and to purchase, but a plan to help people pay their rent, a plan to help more first-time homeowners, and let me say first-generation Homeowners, when your people weren't able to get a house, you'll be able to. Our president and vice president have a plan to do that and help with down payment assistance and to help existing homeowners with their expanding costs. Let me say this to you. Our vice president is laser focused on expanding opportunities for families, seniors, veterans, young adults as they're starting out here in Charlotte and across this state and across our country. From day one, Vice President Harris has centered people. People. And I'm proud to call her my vice president. And I'm proud to stand with the other members of the Biden-Harris administration as we create more opportunities for you and your children and your people. Thank you so much for having us here. Take care.
Please welcome Governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper.
Hello, Charlotte! It is always great to be back on the campus of JC. You know what? North Carolina has more four-year HBCUs than any other state in the country. We have more HBCU students than any other state in the country. And it's one of our biggest workforce development tools that we use across this country. It's also great to welcome back to Charlotte my good friend, Vice President Kamala Harris. And today is lucky 13 for her. This is her 13th trip to our state since taking office, and it gets better every single time. She's here today on her economic opportunity tour, visiting states across the country, showing how the Biden-Harris administration has been supporting communities and helping people thrive and giving people more opportunities. North Carolina has been very happy to be a big part of that success. We've been named the #1 state for business 2 years in a row. We have a proven track record of reeling in great paying jobs, and we're laser focused on helping small businesses and launching them to grow their companies. In fact, we know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and it's clear that the Biden-Harris administration knows that too. They also know that the ladder of economic opportunity is harder to climb for some people just because of their race, their gender, their background, or their socioeconomic status. So they've been focused on supporting people from historically underserved communities by helping them access the capital that they need. Their unprecedented investments in helping small businesses have fostered the fastest creation of Black-owned small businesses in more than 3 decades. Back in March, the Vice President and I stopped in Durham to visit Black Wall Street to announce $32 million in federal funding to women and minority-led venture capital funds to support historically underserved and small businesses and entrepreneurs. And here in North Carolina, our Office of Historically Underutilized Businesses has done similar work. Around 7,100 businesses in North Carolina are now Board 8 Hub certified. And that means it puts them in the running for state contracts and gives them important opportunities while saving taxpayer money. We're also able to help many businesses during the pandemic with financial help from the Biden administration's American Rescue Plan. Many of you may remember Andrea Harris and what a great leader she was for North Carolina. In 2020, I created the Andrea Harris Social, Economic, Environmental, and Health Equity Task Force to further the economic development of marginalized communities and keep a focus on women and minority-owned businesses. And that task force continues its work today. But you know, even big ideas, business smarts, and even that extra help will only get you so far if you're crushed by the weight of medical debt or health problems. Economic opportunity is also about staying healthy, treating sickness, and being able to afford it. So we finally got the legislature to expand Medicaid in North Carolina. And that is why we call it the Working Families Bill of the Decade in our state. We already have enrolled more than 483,000 people in Medicaid expansion. They're getting the quality health care they need to stay well, to support their families, to find stability that they need to launch their big ideas and give them back to their communities to keep North Carolina growing. So today, there is no better place for the Vice President to visit to talk about economic opportunity for everyone. We have been so grateful to have strong partners in President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris as we work to ensure that every single North Carolinian has the opportunity to succeed. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Desmond Wiggin, and it is truly an honor to be before you today. I am a proud representative of Charlotte, the city of Charlotte, because this is the city that raised me, it's where I raised my family, and it's where I founded my company. I owe much to my family as a first-generation American with roots in Jamaica. My parents sacrificed their careers to provide opportunities for me and my younger brother for time here in the States, instilling values to work hard and persevere, which I still hold with me today. I am also a proud husband and father, dedicated to my lovely wife that's in the audience, AKA my co-founder, and my 2 young children. I'm also a graduate of the Winston-Salem State University, Ram Pride, and also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. But today, I stand before you as the CEO and founder of Battery Exchange, a startup committed to creating equitable access to connected technologies. Our mission is to be at the intersection of mobile energy, information, and resources for citizens and organizations alike. In fact, we actually have our product at Johnson C. Smith University, offering students energy, but also career opportunities and internships with our corporate partners. See, Charlotte is not just home, it's my foundation for my entrepreneurial journey. Cities like Charlotte across the United States are emerging powerhouses bursting with potential. And I am thrilled about the opportunity to have intergenerational wealth in these communities. As someone who confronts entrepreneurship and the landscape of entrepreneurship head on, I know firsthand the difficulties of raising capital and building an organization. Witnessing the rulings against organizations such as like the Fairless Fund, who is fighting for equitable access, is disheartening. Those efforts underscore the importance of Vice President Kamala Harris's work and the initiatives like the SSBCI. I'm thankful to be awarded the funding opportunity through the HBCU Founder Initiative on behalf of NextCubed and the NC Rural Institution. Vice President Harris's leadership in securing funding for founders like myself is not just a policy effort, it's a lifeline to entrepreneurs like myself, striving to create dreams and make them reality. Vice President Harris inspires me with her unwavering commitment to creating opportunities for underrepresented communities. She fights tirelessly to ensure that entrepreneurs like myself, regardless of their background, have the resources they need to succeed. Her vision and dedication are the setting foundation for a more equitable environment. I'm thankful for this opportunity to talk about myself, my organization, and the capital impact towards entrepreneurial growth. But now, what you guys are all waiting for, we're going to get into a riveting conversation about the amazing work that's happening with the Economic Opportunity Tour. First, I would like to introduce Bakari T. Sellers, and Bakari is a politician and attorney, a political commentator, and he served South Carolina House of Representative for the 90th District from 2006 to 2014. And we're so glad to have him with us today. Next up, you guys might know this name. I'd like to introduce Mr. Michael Ealy, actor and activist. You may know this gentleman from movies like Barbershop, Too Fast, Too Furious, Takers, and literally I can go on and on. We're excited to have you as well. And now, without further ado, it is my distinct honor to introduce the first woman to be elected as Vice President for the United States, Miss Kamala Harris.
Good afternoon, everyone. Indeed. Can we please applaud Desmond as he walks off the stage? I have to say, Desmond, you are just an absolute model of what this tour is about. And everything that you said about yourself, your upbringing, but also what you have done in terms of the young leaders that are leading in this effort, combining things like technology with longstanding needs of communities. You really are doing an extraordinary job. Thank you for being such a big part of this.
And thank you. Please give the Vice President of the United States of America another round of applause. We always love having you down south with us. And before I begin, I'm from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. And I always tell people, my mom and dad say the 2 most important words in the English language are the words thank you, and they're not nearly said enough. And there are 2 people I have to acknowledge before we begin. One is one of the greatest mayors in the United States of America, Vi Laus. Please give her a round of applause. And the governor of North Carolina, but give him a round of applause anyway. I think he might have slid out. Yeah. And so one of the things that I enjoy about just being in your space, Madam Vice President, is that you're very intentional and you're very purposeful. And you've traveled across the country and met voters and met students in particular where they were and meeting people where they are. And you've led the fight for reproductive rights. You've challenged and talked about ending gun violence, and now you're on this economic opportunity tour. I think the first question we have to ask is why this tour? Why now?
Thank you, Bakari, and thank you for your leadership and always using your voice in such a courageous and important way. And Michael, thank you. He's just been on the road with me for different events. Why this tour? Well, most importantly, it's because I feel very strongly that we need to be in the community, listening, and giving people information about the work that we have done that will help folks. Because I'm very aware that, we can do all this good stuff in Washington, D.C., but if it doesn't hit the streets, it doesn't matter. So I'm on this tour to travel our country and describe what we have done with the full intention that the opinion leaders, the civic leaders, the community leaders that are here will help us get the word out so that people can take advantage of what is available to help them. And in particular, on the issue of, for this tour, economic opportunity. So the tour is designed, and what I've been talking about are 2 things in particular. The obstacles that exist that get in the way of people achieving their dreams around their economic future, intergenerational wealth. Desmond talked about that. To talk about the obstacles that exist that often are no fault of the individual, but that are systemic and that we are working to bypass. And then also to explain to folks the opportunities that are available. So today we'll talk about obstacles like debt, a big issue that holds people back. We're going to talk about the opportunities that are available, such as access to capital, federal government contracts that can infuse communities and entrepreneurs and individuals with the resources that they need and that they rightly earn but don't have access to otherwise. So that's the purpose of the tour. I believe very strongly that the accomplishments of our administration, such as creating 15 million new jobs, creating over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs, historic low unemployment, in particular for the Black community, are very important, critically important. And that is not to the exclusion of also understanding we have extraordinary capacity and leaders in the community who have incredible ideas, who are entrepreneurial, who are ambitious, who have aspirations that, yes, are about making sure that everyone is employed, but also the creation of wealth. To aspire to create wealth is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. If that is what one chooses. I, on the other hand, have chosen to live a life of public service.
But I am all for any of you get yours if that's what you want, right?
We trying. We definitely
And
are
so that's
trying.
what this tour is about.
You know, Madam Vice President, the greatest accomplishment in my life is getting Ellen Rucker Sellers to say yes, and I do.
And she is here. Where is she? There,
she's
you are
also,
a saint.
Oh, now she's a saint. Okay.
Yeah, she's a saint.
But she's also a small business owner, and I see what she goes through with Rucker Roots and trying to make sure that her business excels.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talk about often is access to capital for entrepreneurship and small businesses.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been very important to you and the President of the United States. Tell us more about this work and why is it so important to be able to get these small businesses their access to capital?
So let's start with the point that Ellen knows well, which is that not everyone has access to the capital that is necessary to start up a business, but it is not for lack of a good idea. It is not for lack of incredible work ethic. It is not for lack of the ambition to actually create something that will not only benefit oneself or their family, but also the community at large. And so the focus of my work since my days in the Senate has been to expand access to capital, and in particular to do that through community banks. Because community banks are self-defined. They are situated in the community. They are run and by folks who know the community, know the capacity of the community, know the mores of the community, know the needs of the community, and are then able to give the kind of assistance that is about loans, but also about helping folks with financial literacy, helping folks learn how to run a payroll, how to deal with business taxes. Because many of us, we didn't grow up learning that in our household, and we don't really teach that in school. And so, but it's not for lack of anyone's ability to learn it if there are resources that can teach it. So community banks have been my focus. When I was in the Senate, we got over $12 billion more into community banks. And since I've been vice president, we have partnered with the big banks and also technology companies to, as of now, I created a thing called the Economic Opportunity Council, partnering with tech companies, foundations, and big banks. And now we're getting over $3 billion more into our community banks to create access to capital. And what that means is that we also then, working out of these community banks, get the word out on the street. Bakari, Michael, one of the things that's really interesting, the numbers I have are that Black entrepreneurs are 3 times less likely to apply for small business loans. And one of the main reasons why is because folks don't want to be disappointed. We know what that's like. It takes a lot to put yourself out there and to believe that you will be taken seriously and treated fairly. And so that's another issue that we are addressing with this tour and the work we're doing through community banks, is knowing you are welcome and you have a place where you can go that will treat you fairly and with respect and with the dignity that you so rightly deserve.
Madam Vice President, it's an honor to be here with you today. I think this tour is such a great idea, and I think just it's working, one. And two, I think it's always great for the people to hear directly from you what is happening, what is being done. I know an important issue for you is housing.
Yes.
And I know it's been an important issue for you throughout your career. Being in California the last 20 plus years, I know how much work you've done there. I know it's at the forefront for you. It was at the forefront for you there. It's at the forefront for you now in this administration. The question I have is, it's a priority. So what is the administration doing to help ease the burden of home ownership right now?
So let's start, as you know, Michael, and we've talked about this before. Home ownership is one of the best ways to achieve intergenerational wealth.
Correct.
Right? So, and let's think about it this way. When you are able to buy a home, obviously for most of us with a mortgage, but when you are able to have a home that is yours, that you own, you accrue capital, right? And that means that when your child says, okay, now everybody, I think everybody in North Carolina can handle this. When your child says you want to go to Howard University, I couldn't help myself.
We know.
When their child says, I want to go to a HBCU such as the one that we are so privileged to be in right now, you can say, honey, you don't have to take out that loan. I'll take some equity out of the home. You don't have to take out a loan. I'll take some equity out of the house to help you pay that tuition. Or if your child says, I want to start a business, you can say, honey, I can take some equity out of the home and help you with some startup capital. Home ownership is one of the best ways that we achieve intergenerational wealth. We also know that it is one of the many issues where we have seen incredible obstacles for Black families. We don't even need to go as far back as nobody got the 20 acres and a mule. Let's go to the fact that we recently celebrated D-Day. And we rightly celebrated what we have called the greatest generation. Well, there was a public policy, rightly in our country, that said about that greatest generation, you have brought stability to the world. You, as American military members, most of whom are men, you have served your country and the world with such dignity, to such great result. So we want to invest and reward you. And the federal policy then was to give them loans to help them buy homes. And as we know, we had plenty of Black servicemen who served in World War II, but because of discriminatory practices in terms of how those loans were given out, did not receive the benefit of that boost that occurred in our country to help people achieve wealth. So there were pre-existing disparities, and then you have this boost. You think about it in terms of the history of redlining.
Yeah.
You think about it in the history of what was called a whole federal policy around urban renewal, which basically resulted in freeways cutting through Black communities and other communities of color, thereby dividing up communities around what otherwise were thriving commerce communities. So what we have been doing as an administration to deal with this issue is to, one, acknowledge the truth about the disparities, and to seek out and identify the disparities and the built-in systems that still exist that create those obstacles to home ownership. And I'm going to talk about one in particular, racial bias in home appraisals.
Yeah.
So we decided to take that on. Many of you may know the stories about a Black family that wants to sell their home and then has the appraiser come in, and the house is appraised for what they know is less than its value. And you probably know the stories about how they'll then reach out to family friends who are white and say, hey, will you all come over, bring your family pictures? We're going to take down ours, and you invite the appraiser. And the home appraises for higher value. So one of the issues that we are taking on is this issue, and are now requiring that appraisers have racial bias training before they are able to do this work. We are also giving, for people who are the first generation in their family to seek to buy a home, $25,000 grants for startup capital to actually be able to pay down on home ownership. $25,000 if you are first, or you are the generation that is the first in your family to be able to buy a home. The other thing we are doing is, for a certain tranche of folks, helping them first-time homeowners, $400 a month in credits toward paying your mortgage. And these issues are exactly the kind of issues that, when you address them, make a huge difference in terms of who's able to buy a home. And that matters. And listen, you probably are sensing from the things that I'm describing, we have been taking a critical look at those specific pieces of the system that have long gone overlooked, that are, that the story about the princess and the pea, that seemingly small thing that makes all the difference. These specific aspects of the system that have kept people from achieving their dreams. Another issue that we have been dealing with is federal contracts. So if you get a federal contract, being very frank, unless you mess it up, it's yours for life. But what we know is that when you're talking about Black entrepreneurs, Black small business owners, less likely to have the relationships or know the process for applying for a federal contract. When President Biden and I came in, we committed to increase federal contracts to minority-owned businesses by 50%, and we're on track to get that done by the end of 2025. Part of this tour is to create information and available to everyone here to know how you go about applying for federal contracts and which federal contracts are up. Because remember, we also came in and are finally fixing the infrastructure problem in America. Somebody talked about Infrastructure Week, which never happened. We actually got it done. Think about the number of contracts, federal contracts, based on the money we are putting literally on the streets of America to upgrade our sidewalks and our bridges and our freeways. Do you know that the 90% of construction companies employ 20 or fewer people? Those are small businesses. And then we have all this federal work that is happening around construction work. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act. We're putting, by my estimate, $1 trillion on the streets of America in the next 10 years to deal with the extreme climate occurrences, adaptation, resilience, investing in a clean energy economy. Those are federal contracts. So when we make a commitment to increase by 50% federal contracts going to minority-owned businesses, think about what that can mean in terms of a boost to communities around the creation and sustaining of wealth and wealth generating businesses.
Wow. It's amazing to hear it directly from her, isn't it? It's just amazing. One of the things you brought up when we first sat down was you talked about how debt is affecting people, whether it be student loans or medical debt.
Yeah.
How do you feel like what is the administration doing to help kind of address these obstacles? And, how can we move forward?
Right. So debt is probably one of the biggest issues that holds people back in our country. And we decided to take it on because, our philosophy is that we want people to not just be able to get by, but get ahead. And debt is one of those things that holds people back from getting ahead. So we decided to take on, for example, the issue of student loan debt. I will say that here at this incredible HBCU, one of the things we know is that Black students are more likely to be Pell Grant recipients and take out student loans and endure for years, if not decades, student loan debt. And what that does to then hold back their ability to aspire to have a family, buy a home. So we decided to take it on, and not without great opposition from people in Washington, D.C. Let's be clear about that. They didn't want this. They said, well, I got mine, you should be able to do yours. Instead of taking into account, again, what we have already discussed in terms of where people start. Not everybody starts out on the same base, right? And that's part of our mentality in thinking about this. So we have now forgiven over $160 billion in student loan debt, benefiting about 5 million people. I have met just today people who have had their student loan debt forgiven. Please testify. And what it has meant, for example, we've also doubled the amount of student loan debt that we have forgiven for public servants, such as firefighters, nurses, teachers. God knows we don't pay them enough as it is. So this has been a game changer for so many. I've met now a number of teachers, for example, who came up to me with tears about how for decades they've been living with tens, if not as much as hundreds of thousands of student loan debt, but they loved teaching so much that they would not leave the profession, but they would tell me about other teachers who just couldn't afford, with those salaries being so low and that debt, to get by. So again, it's not only about our accomplishments on the issue of the creation of wealth. It's equally important, Bakari and Michael, to understand why. You got to see people and understand that people have many facets to their life. And when people work hard and do good work, the system should reward that, right? Medical debt. So medical debt. Medical debt, for the most part, comes about because of a medical emergency for the majority of people, which means what? Wasn't planned. Nobody asks to be sick or experience a medical debt. It's not something people bring upon themselves. And it can result in, again, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt as a result of that medical emergency. And forever until now, that could count against your credit score. Your credit score is supposed to be a measure of, are you financially responsible? Why would we say that medical debt is a measure of whether you're financially responsible? That doesn't make any sense, and it's not right. So we have now made it so that medical debt cannot be a part in calculating your credit score. And now, because there's so many apps, most people know their credit score, like how much you weigh, right? And what that number means in terms of your eligibility for a car loan, home loan, or even just to get an apartment lease. So this is going to be a game changer for so many people. And again, it's about, debt is not just about a financial number. It's about how it weighs on people to keep them back when they're working hard and want to move forward. And so I'm particularly proud of what we've done on medical debt. I must say, as a point of emphasis, because again, to the opinion leaders, I need your help. On the student loan debt piece, please remind people to apply for it and not think that, oh, if I apply, I'm not going to get it. I've met a lot of people who have told me that. I didn't apply for it because I didn't think I'd be eligible. 1. 2, please help get the word out. You are entitled to student loan forgiveness even if you did not graduate. Help us get the word out. Because again, it's about creating public policies that are just logical. So what's the logic in that? Okay, a lot of people drop out because they can't afford to pay tuition.
Yeah.
And before they dropped out, they were taking out student loans. The student loan company ain't saying, well, since you didn't graduate, you don't owe us. So people who had to drop out still owe that debt. So that's why we created the policy, to be intentional, Bakari, to be intentional. Even if you didn't graduate, you're eligible.
I'm going to use just a slight bit of personal privilege because you talked about being intentional for this last question. And I think that the White House and yourself have been very intentional about having Michael and I lead this conversation. Yeah. And why I say that is because having Black men a part of this conversation is so very important. Yeah. And we need the individuals who are under the sound of our voice to go out and be apostles of the good news.
Yes.
And so when people ask, what is the White House doing about Black men, you can say that we had a conversation about economic mobility, and was very diverse in our thought. And also, I saw some Jack and Jillers earlier today. Yeah. I know they're having their convention this week, but this is a room full of, and I hate the word future leaders. I hate that because they're really the leaders of right now.
Yep.
And you're also intentional about doing this at an HBCU. And this institution is one of the greatest HBCUs. Now, Michael may not know this, but the greatest HBCU is Morehouse College, but I digress. But what would your advice be?
You do you, Bakari. You do you.
Howard's in the top 10-ish. So what advice would you give this room full of the leaders of right now? Not future leaders, but these young people who are the leaders of this moment that we're in.
The first piece of advice I have is dream with ambition. And never apologize for your ambition. Never apologize for that. It is a good thing to have ambition. I will also say this. I eat no for breakfast. I don't hear no. And many times in your life, you're going to hear no. Someone is going to, maybe even many people say to you, oh, it's not your time. Oh, nobody like you has done that before. Oh, they're not ready for you. Oh, and then I love this next one. Oh, that's going to be hard work. Really? Don't hear that. Don't ever hear that. And I've got a whole lot of advice. The other piece of advice I would offer, so you just open that up. Many times you're going to find whether you are in a boardroom, a meeting room, in a room where you need to pitch, where you're going to be the only one that looks like you in that room. Mm-hmm. And what you must remember, and I'd ask you to look around this room right now, what you must remember is you are never in that room alone. We are all in that room with you, expecting that when you walk in that room, you walk in chin up, shoulders back, understanding the voice and the voices that you carry that are so proud of you being in that room and are applauding your presence in that room. That is critically important. That is critically important. You got to be able to see what can be unburdened by what has been. And never allow yourself to put any barriers on yourself based on other people's limited ability to see who can do what. That's their problem, not yours.
Yes, ma'am. Before you do the rope line, may I ask you for a favor?
Yes.
It's Michael's favor. Can we take a selfie
Yes,
right here? All right.
absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Oh, but I do have one more thing. A week from today is Juneteenth. And I would add, so we have decided, and I have issued a call to action. It's our newest federal holiday. I was proud as a member of the United States Senate to sponsor a piece of legislation to make it a holiday. And a lot of people have been wondering of the various ways that traditionally Juneteenth has been celebrated, as now it is a national holiday, how do we do it going forward? And what I'd ask is everyone to consider, in addition to your normal tradition for Juneteenth, think of it as a day of action to register people to vote. Please. Thank you.
We are honored to welcome the 46th President of the United States, the Honorable Joseph R. Biden Jr., as our commencement speaker this morning. They say that when you find a job that you love, it isn't work at all. That can be said for Joseph Biden Jr., who has spent his entire life in public service. His career began in 1970 in his hometown of Delaware, when he was elected to the Newcastle County Council, a post he sought just after graduating from Syracuse Law School. 2 years later, at 29, Biden was one of the youngest people ever elected to the US Senate, where he remained for 36 years. During that time, he served 16 years as chairman, a ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and while there is much debate in the news about US foreign relations, President Biden served